one thing I wanted to say about this, that to relate it back to SJW ideology, and that I think is fascinating and infuriating, is this. In a conversation with some well-meaning people yesterday, they were, and these are white female SJWs, or at least people who subscribe to a large part of the SJW ideology, right? So they were saying that that these kids, the boys, that their white male privilege protected them in a way that wouldn't have happened if these had been black kids. And I'm like, can you explain that to me? How do you see white male privilege operating here? Because honestly, and by the way, there was one black kid and he got singled out for special taunting by the black protesters.
Right, as an Uncle Tom and whatever else they called him. Yeah.
They called him the N-word over and over. But so explain to me how white male privilege protected these boys, because these boys were targeted by adult activists, lied about on the national media by adults, doxxed by adults, threatened with violence. They were harassed by adults, plastered across the media as the face of white supremacy, right? White male supremacy. So that's, wow, what a privilege. And the thing is, they were targeted because of their race, because of their sex, and because of their MAGA hats. So I don't see how white male privilege is operating to protect these kids at all. Like, what kind of privilege is that? And if it had been black kids, I would argue that they would not have become a national news story. That if it had been mostly black kids who were standing there enduring racial taunts from a group of white protesters, and then standing there stoically as a adult bang drums in their faces, like they would not have become maligned the way they were in the national media. You would not have seen journalists lying about them. They would not have been called racist and sexist and all kinds of names. They would not have been targeted for harassment and doxing and death threats by adults in journalism. And
it would have been treated rightly as victims of hate. Yes,
they would have been immediately treated as like stoic, like civil rights heroes. And so I'm like, but explain to me, to these women, I was like, explain to me how you see white male privilege protecting these kids. And so their response was that, no, if these had been black kids, they probably would have been tear gassed or shot and killed or thrown in jail. And I'm like, wow, okay, so I don't believe that's true at all, that would have happened. But we don't even have to guess what would have happened to a group of black protesters, because there was a group of black protesters there. The black Israelites did not.
And they were involved in this.
They were involved.
On the sidelines. Yeah.
Yes, and they were involved. And their behavior was much worse to these kids. And they were instigators. They did not get shot and killed. They did not get tear gas. They did not get thrown into jail. They did not get lied about on the national press. They did not become the target of doxing and harassment and threats by the national media. None of the things that happened to these kids happened to them. In fact, the mainstream media and SJWs have mostly ignored the fact they were there. They cut them out of the first video they showed. So don't talk that. I wanted to point that out because that's what the SJW ideology does to your brain. It rots it. Like, you're putting your ideology first and you're putting truth down here. And you're not able to see the truth because, like Tom was talking about earlier, you're wearing these ridiculous blinders that tell you white male privilege is a thing and it operates everywhere and all that. I don't see white male privilege operating here at all. But you can't think for yourself because you're being told everything you say has to be filtered through this ideology of male privilege and white privilege and bad guys and good guys. And like, this is what makes me angry, Carter. I'm like, you are sacrificing yourself and your thoughts and your ability to think rationally for this ideology. And I know it's comforting to have this. I used to subscribe to this ideology. It's comforting. It relieves you of the burden of thinking for yourself. And everything is more simple. It's like there's good guys and bad guys, and we have all these neat little categories. And so these kids are white and they're boys. They check off 2 oppressor categories. Therefore, they're the bad guys here, period. I know that's simple and easy, but it is wrong and it is evil. I'm not saying you're evil for believing that, but that is evil.
No,
and that makes me
evil, Keri. Say they're evil.
They're not evil. My friend is not evil. She's not evil, but she's pushing an evil belief system.
But she's intellectually dishonest, which is I think intellectual dishonesty is a lesser variant of evil. It's like pickpocketing instead of murder, but it's still a level of wrongness, right? Being intellectually dishonest is not something that's neutral morally. So yeah, I mean, and I don't know. The point that you made, that like we can see how they would treat black males, like because they were there, really underscores this inability for any of these people on the left, including most of the mainstream media, to have any sort of objectivity. And no wonder they're losing their credibility. I think average people are starting to wake up and see, like, why should I believe anything the media says when this is how they report this kind of stuff? Mm-hmm. It's just dishonest. I don't have a better word for it.
No,
it's just dishonest and hateful. Dishonest. It's dishonest and hateful because they were picked on. Let's be clear. It wasn't white male privilege. It was white male discrimination. They were picked on because they were white men. That's why they were picked on. And all the left did was look at the color of the skin and the gender of the people involved, and they picked the people lowest on the social justice hierarchy and blamed them. That's what they did.
Yeah. But see, they've been brainwashed into this ideology, like we've talked about in previous episodes, of believing, because they've bought into these new attempted redefinitions of the terms sexism and racism, they've been taught it's impossible to be sexist towards men or impossible to be racist towards white people. And so because they believe that malarkey, frankly, they're unable, it's not rational. There's no logic there, but they believe it. It's an incredible amount of faith, and it is brainwashing. And so, no, my friend is not evil, but she's been brainwashed. She's bought into certain tenets of this belief system, and it is intellectually dishonest. But she's also deceiving herself. Like when I believe
it's not healthy for her either. Yeah, absolutely.
When I preached that stuff, I was self-deluded. I was deluding. I locked my brain up in a cage, and I went out and preached the tenets I was supposed to preach. And I would have been like her if I were still in that belief system. I would have been trying to twist this around and force it through my ideology so that I could attempt to try and articulate it in a way that made sense, because that was my job. I felt, to try and make sense of this belief system in the face of truth.